Gentlemen, there's a hidden transformation that takes place in a man who's spent a long time without a relationship. It's not always obvious at first glance, but the longer he's been alone, the more dangerous, more disciplined, and more self-aware he becomes. Why? Because solitude either breaks you or it builds you. When a man hasn't relied on anyone emotionally for months or even years, he goes through a quiet evolution that most people don't notice until it's too late. Emotional independence is not something he reads about or copies from others. It's something he earns through consistent solitude, silence, and self-reflection. While others might be busy chasing relationships to fill emotional gaps or mask their inner emptiness, this man begins to lean into the discomfort of being alone. He doesn't numb his feelings with distractions. He doesn't drown his loneliness in hookups or surface-level conversations. Instead, he sits with his emotions. He studies them. He watches the waves of sadness, anger, longing, and insecurity rise and fall within him without trying to escape them. Over time, this builds an emotional muscle that most people never develop. He learns to be his own therapist, his own motivator, his own source of comfort. When something goes wrong, he doesn't immediately think of who he can call. He thinks of how he can handle it himself. When life punches him in the face, he doesn't run to someone to fix it. He tightens his jaw, looks the problem in the eye, and handles it. He learns to regulate his emotions without anyone's help. No girlfriend to validate him, no partner to coddle him, no one to say, "It's okay." And in that lonely space, he becomes the voice that tells himself, "It's okay, I've got this." The emotional independence he builds makes him immune to manipulation. He's not afraid of being alone, so he's not afraid to walk away from anything or anyone that threatens his peace. He doesn't tolerate disrespect, not because he's arrogant, but because he values the calm he's built within himself far too much to let anyone disrupt it. People who are emotionally dependent are quick to beg, chase, or compromise just to keep someone around. But this man, he doesn't beg, he doesn't chase. If you want to leave, the door's open. If you want to test him, you won't get a reaction. His peace comes first, always. This emotional independence also affects how he views relationships. He doesn't enter a relationship to be saved, completed, or entertained. He's not looking for a woman to fix him. He's already done the inner work, so he's not impressed by charm or beauty alone. He looks deeper. He evaluates whether someone adds value to his life or simply adds noise. He's not afraid to reject someone he once would have died to impress, simply because he understands the price of losing his inner peace, and that makes him a rare breed. You see, when you don't need someone emotionally, you're no longer trapped by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, all of that dissolves. You don't say yes when you mean no. You don't tolerate energy vampires. You don't give your heart away just because someone shows interest. You protect yourself with boundaries, not walls, but boundaries that are firm, intentional, and unshakable. He's not cold, but he is calm. He's not heartless, but his heart has become disciplined. He knows the difference between connection and attachment, between love and emotional dependency. And what many people don't understand is that this kind of man becomes incredibly attractive, but also deeply intimidating, because he cannot be controlled. He doesn't flinch when someone threatens to leave. He doesn't panic when someone pulls away. He's been in that place before, alone with nothing but his thoughts, and he made peace with it. That means he's willing to risk losing anything that disturbs his emotional balance. He doesn't have outbursts. He doesn't collapse under pressure. And when someone tries to use guilt, silence, or emotional games to get to him, it doesn't work. He sees it all for what it is, a test of his inner control. So while others may measure strength by status, income, or looks, this man's strength is measured by one thing: how calm he remains when everything around him tries to pull him off center. That calmness, that self-trust, that emotional sovereignty, it's not built overnight. It's the result of being alone long enough to confront himself, question his patterns, and learn how to self-soothe. And once he's built that, he never forgets how powerful it is, because now he's free. Free from the need to be needed, free from the fear of being alone, free from emotional slavery. He belongs to no one but himself, and that's what makes him truly powerful. A single man with no romantic distractions can become one of the most focused beings on earth. Without the constant emotional roller coaster of modern relationships, without the late-night arguments, the insecurities, the second-guessing, the texting wars, he reclaims his mental bandwidth. He's no longer mentally split between pursuing his personal mission and managing someone else's expectations. This creates a vacuum where pure, undiluted focus can take root. And when that happens, something dangerous begins to emerge. He begins to obsess, not with a person, but with purpose. He doesn't wake up wondering what mood someone else is in. He wakes up thinking about his next move, his next goal, his next victory. His energy isn't scattered. It's like a laser, precise, intentional, and relentless. Most people don't realize how much time and energy they sacrifice in relationships. The overthinking, the anxiety, the emotional labor. It drains the very fuel needed to pursue greatness. But a man who has been single long enough learns to harness that fuel and redirect it. He pours it into the gym, where he transforms his body not just to look good, but to develop discipline. He pours it into his work, building a business, climbing his career, mastering a skill, learning a language, or creating something that leaves a legacy. He reads, he studies, he watches not what entertains, but what educates. He replaces shallow dopamine hits with long-term strategy. This isn't just productivity, it's transformation. The longer he stays in this mode, the more intense his focus becomes. He starts structuring his days with surgical precision. He becomes addicted to progress. Every win, no matter how small, becomes a building block in a tower of self-mastery. He starts to crave the grind more than the comfort. And because there's no one there distracting him with emotional drama or unnecessary detours, he begins to move through life like a man possessed. He doesn't waste time on meaningless conversations, pointless debates, or social obligations that don't serve his future. His standards rise, not just for women but for everything: how he eats, how he sleeps, who he surrounds himself with, what he allows into his mind. He becomes extremely protective of his mental space. And this is where things get dangerous, because a man who becomes comfortable being alone with a mission is almost impossible to control. You can't guilt him into doing something that doesn't align with his goals. You can't tempt him with things that once used to distract him. He's tasted what it feels like to wake up every day with clarity and go to sleep knowing he made progress. He's seen the numbers grow, the muscles build, the bank account rise, the skills sharpen. He's had full days where he didn't have to explain himself to anyone or compromise his schedule for another person's needs. That freedom becomes sacred. That rhythm becomes addictive. When this man walks into a room, he carries a different energy. It's not loud or boastful, it's quiet intensity, People can sense that he's not looking for approval. He's not looking for attention. He's there to observe, to extract value, or to execute. He doesn't waste words. He doesn't waste motion, and that makes people curious. They start to wonder what he's about. But most won't understand what it took to get there. The loneliness, the sacrifice. The nights where he could have gone out or hooked up or chased cheap pleasure, but instead he stayed in and studied his craft. Most people won't see that because it happened in silence. But the results are undeniable. The longer a man stays out of the relationship loop, the more dangerous this focus becomes, because it starts compounding. What begins as quiet discipline turns into unstoppable momentum. Opportunities come to him. People start respecting his time. Women who once ignored him now sense his presence differently. But by then, he's not even seeking them. He's too deep in the grind, too in love with the progress. He doesn't chase anymore. He attracts. But even that doesn't distract him, because he's built something stronger than lust, direction. His future becomes more important than anyone's opinion. His goals become non-negotiable. His mind becomes his kingdom, and anyone who enters it must bring value or be dismissed without hesitation. That kind of focus, once developed, changes a man forever. It reshapes his identity. He's no longer a reactor. He's a creator. He's not tossed around by feelings or situations. He's anchored by intention. And when you look into his eyes, you don't see desperation. You don't see confusion. You see clarity, determination, purpose. And that kind of man, that focused, mission-driven man, is a rare and powerful force. When a man spends an extended period without being in a relationship, something profound begins to happen within him. He starts to see things more clearly. At first, it's subtle. He begins to notice the patterns that used to blindside him. He starts questioning the dynamics he used to accept without hesitation. What once felt normal, compromising himself to gain affection, tolerating drama to avoid loneliness, justifying someone's poor behavior because of how she looked or how she made him feel, starts to feel repulsive. It's like a fog has been lifted. Without the daily distractions of emotional highs and lows, his mind quiets down, and in that silence, truth speaks louder than ever. Time alone gives a man space to reflect without interference. He doesn't have someone around constantly influencing his emotions or decisions. He can look at his past without bias. He replays old relationships in his mind, but now with detachment. He starts to ask better questions. Why did I stay when I wasn't being respected? Why did I ignore those red flags? Why did I feel the need to prove myself over and over again just to feel loved? He begins to see where he gave too much, where he lost himself trying to make it work, and where he allowed emotional manipulation to wear him down. That kind of clarity is painful, but it's also liberating. He starts recognizing his own patterns too. He sees how he used to operate from scarcity, how he mistook attention for love, how he tolerated disrespect in exchange for companionship. And because he's no longer inside a relationship, he can analyze everything from a distance. It's like standing on a mountain, looking down at the battlefield where he once fought blindly. From up there, everything makes sense. He begins to see the games, the emotional tactics, the passive-aggressive comments disguised as jokes, the hot hand, cold behavior that kept him addicted. He sees it all now, not with bitterness, but with understanding. This clarity also sharpens his standards. He stops fantasizing about what a relationship could be, and instead begins to evaluate what it should actually look like. He stops chasing fantasy and starts identifying reality. He realizes that beauty fades, charm wears off, and words mean nothing without consistent actions. He becomes less impressed by aesthetics and more interested in values. He starts asking, does she bring peace or chaos? Does she respect boundaries? Does she know who she is? Or is she just seeking validation? Is she emotionally mature, or does she use her emotions as weapons? These aren't questions he would have asked when he was desperate for love or companionship. But now he's different, he's aware, he's awake. This kind of awareness also builds his ability to walk away. When you can clearly see what doesn't serve you, you're not tempted to hold on to it. He no longer clings to potential. He no longer ignores disrespect just because he's afraid of being alone. He's already been alone, and in that time he found something better than comfort. He found self-respect. So when he meets someone new, he evaluates without emotional distortion. He doesn't let lust override logic. He doesn't project his fantasies onto people. He sees them as they are, not as he hopes they'll become. And if something doesn't feel right, he leaves, quietly, without a scene. Without needing closure, just gone. This clarity also changes how he reacts to manipulation. The guilt trips, the silent treatment, the tests. He sees right through them. What used to confuse him now amuses him. He doesn't take the bait. He doesn't over-explain. He doesn't engage in emotional tug-of-war. He just steps back, watches, and evaluates. And if it doesn't align with his peace, he exits. No drama, no regrets. Just clarity in action. And the most powerful part of this clarity, it gives him inner peace. He's no longer in emotional survival mode. He doesn't wake up wondering where he stands with someone. He doesn't go to sleep with knots in his stomach because of mixed signals. He's no longer a prisoner to someone else's mood swings or approval. He's centered, grounded, aware, and in that awareness he finds freedom. Clarity doesn't come overnight. It's earned through solitude, reflection, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But once a man has it, once he truly sees, he can never unsee, and that vision becomes his compass. He no longer moves based on emotion alone. He moves with intention, discernment, and unshakable self-worth. He becomes immune to the illusions that once controlled him, and because of that, every decision he makes is sharper, stronger, and far more aligned with who he truly is. When a man spends a long time without a relationship, he inevitably begins to reframe how he views women, not from a place of bitterness or resentment, but from a space of distance and honesty. In relationships, emotions can distort perception. When you're emotionally invested, you tend to overlook things, make excuses, justify behavior that doesn't align with your standards, or even convince yourself that what's unhealthy is actually normal. But once that emotional attachment is severed and time passes, the lens clears. He's no longer seeing women through the filter of romantic idealism. He starts to observe, analyze, and understand them with an objective eye. This shift in perspective changes everything. In the beginning, it can be disorienting. He might feel confusion or even a sense of betrayal, realizing that some of the things he once romanticized were actually red flags. The things he once saw as passion may now look like manipulation. What he thought was just how she is now looks like emotional immaturity. What he interpreted as jealousy because she cared now reveals itself as a lack of trust and control. With space, he starts to recognize patterns, not just in one woman, but across multiple interactions. He sees how many modern women operate from a place of testing, evaluating, withholding, or controlling, not out of malice, but often out of insecurity or societal conditioning. And once he sees it, he can't unsee it. He becomes more aware of the subtle power plays, how attention is weaponized, how compliments are strategically placed or withheld, how affection is given and then suddenly withdrawn to create confusion and dependency. He notices how entitlement sometimes masquerades as empowerment, and how standards for what a man should provide are often inflated beyond reason, while reciprocity is conveniently minimized. He no longer tolerates it, not because he's angry, but because he values fairness, balance, and mutual respect. And he can now spot when those things are missing without being emotionally manipulated into tolerating less than he deserves. He also begins to spot the difference between women who bring peace and those who bring chaos. It becomes almost instant. A woman who genuinely respects herself and others carries herself differently. She doesn't need to play games. She doesn't provoke jealousy to get a reaction. She doesn't make a man guess her intentions or prove his worth through endless tests. She brings calm, not confusion. She brings encouragement, not pressure. And once a man has been away from drama long enough, his nervous system rejects it on instinct. He simply won't entertain anything that brings disorder into his life. A chaotic woman may still be attractive, but the cost of letting her in is too high. And he knows it. This time away also forces him to differentiate between what he wants and what he needs. The woman he once chased based on looks or sex appeal alone now seems empty if she lacks substance. He begins to crave different traits: emotional maturity, patience, kindness, honesty, humility, silence without awkwardness, things he may have overlooked when he was more driven by lust or societal expectations. He doesn't just want someone to post about. He wants someone he can build with, someone who understands the weight he carries, the demons he fights, and the legacy he's working toward. And that level of alignment is rare. So he waits, not out of fear, but out of discernment. He also becomes less reactive to female validation. When you've been without it for a long time and survived, and even thrived, you realize it's not the oxygen you once believed it to be. A compliment doesn't sway him, a flirtatious glance doesn't distract him, attention doesn't intoxicate him, because he's seen how fleeting it all is. He's experienced how quickly interest can turn to withdrawal, how fast "I miss you" can turn into silence. So now he doesn't trust words. He watches behavior, and if the behavior doesn't align with values, he disengages. He doesn't argue, beg, or chase. He simply moves on because he knows his worth and refuses to trade peace for potential. Most importantly, he learns that many women are not used to a man like this. A man who isn't desperate for attention, a man who doesn't get flustered by feminine energy, a man who doesn't tolerate nonsense, no matter how pretty the face delivering it. He starts to recognize that his strength intimidates those who rely on manipulation to feel powerful. He's not emotionally dependent, so he doesn't fold under pressure. He doesn't try to please everyone. He doesn't seek approval. He sees relationships not as an escape or a necessity, but as an addition, something that should elevate, not complicate. So as he continues observing from a distance, his entire mindset around women evolves. He's no longer chasing, convincing, or impressing. He's filtering, watching, testing silently, measuring alignment. And while others may see him as cold or distant, What they don't understand is that he's simply aware of what he used to fall for, what he used to tolerate, and what he refuses to repeat. That awareness doesn't make him arrogant, it makes him dangerous, because he sees clearly now, and with that vision, he becomes immune to illusions that once had power over him. A man who has spent a significant period outside of a relationship becomes something many people can't fully understand, emotionally self-sufficient. In a world that constantly pushes people toward pair bonding, that constantly whispers that happiness comes from finding someone else, this man does something rare. He finds peace, wholeness, and contentment within himself. And that's not something that happens quickly or easily. At first, solitude feels like loneliness. The silence is deafening. There are moments where he questions himself, where he wonders if he's missing out, if maybe he's the problem, if maybe he's too cold, too picky, or too closed off. But as time goes on, something deeper begins to form. That silence that once felt empty becomes sacred. That solitude that once felt isolating becomes empowering. He learns to sit with himself not as a placeholder until someone shows up, but as a complete being who doesn't need another to validate his existence. He becomes his own source of emotional regulation. He no longer looks to someone else to calm him down when he's stressed, to hype him up when he's doubting himself, or to distract him from his own internal conflicts. He faces his emotions head on. He works through his anxiety. He examines his insecurities. He builds emotional muscle the way others build physical strength, through repetition, through struggle, through facing discomfort instead of escaping it. While many jump from one relationship to the next to avoid being alone with their thoughts, he stays. He watches those thoughts. He wrestles with them. He overcomes them. And because of that, he no longer fears being alone. He thrives in it. This emotional independence also rewires how he connects with others. He no longer forms attachments out of need. He doesn't cling. He doesn't chase. He doesn't mold himself to fit someone else's preferences just to avoid being left. He shows up as he is, unapologetic, unfiltered, grounded. And if someone doesn't accept that, he doesn't beg for understanding. He doesn't try to prove his worth. He simply walks away, not with bitterness, but with peace. Because when you've learned how to soothe your own pain, celebrate your own wins, and carry your own burdens, you stop relying on others for your emotional survival. You still appreciate connection, but it becomes an enhancement, not a necessity. People start to notice this difference. He doesn't get thrown off by passive-aggressive behavior. He doesn't overreact to being ignored or misunderstood. He doesn't crumble under the weight of emotional tension. He's calm, centered, and that calmness can be intimidating because many people are used to emotional instability. They're used to chaos being the default. They expect reactivity, neediness, clinginess. But this man is different. He doesn't match chaos with chaos. He dissolves it with indifference, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows the cost of letting someone else's storm disrupt his inner weather. He's fought too hard for his peace to give it away easily. This emotional self-reliance also changes his expectations. He no longer looks for someone to complete him. He looks for someone who is already complete. He's not impressed by codependency disguised as romance. He doesn't find desperation flattering. He wants depth, maturity, substance. He wants someone who knows how to sit in silence without panicking, who knows how to disagree without attacking, who knows how to support without suffocating. And because he holds himself to that same standard, his relationships, if and when he chooses to pursue them, are rooted in mutual strength, not mutual need, he also becomes incredibly selective with his time and energy. He's no longer swayed by fleeting attraction or surface-level connection. He watches how people handle discomfort, how they communicate under pressure, how they treat others when no one's watching. Because he's not just looking for someone to share moments with. He's looking for someone who won't become a liability to his emotional stability. He values his peace more than any temporary thrill, so he takes his time. He observes. He listens more than he speaks. He pays attention to red flags, not with paranoia, but with precision, because he knows what it took to build his emotional balance, and he's not willing to gamble it for anything or anyone that threatens it. What's more, he's not afraid to walk away from good enough. He doesn't settle just because someone is nice or attractive or available. He holds out for alignment, for resonance, for a connection that doesn't just excite him, but strengthens him. And if that doesn't come, he's still okay. He's not waiting in misery for someone to rescue him from himself. He's already rescued himself. He's already made peace with solitude. So anyone who enters his life must bring more than just presence. They must bring peace, purpose, and value. Otherwise, he's content continuing alone, because alone he has clarity, alone he has control, alone he has freedom, and in that freedom he finds something that most never do, emotional sovereignty. He becomes the master of his inner world, and once you've ruled that kingdom, you never again hand the keys to someone who doesn't understand its worth. When a man goes without a relationship for a long time, he doesn't just grow mentally or emotionally. He begins to build an almost unshakable masculine energy. It doesn't come from arrogance, aggression, or performance. It's not loud, boastful, or attention-seeking. In fact, it's the opposite. It's rooted in silence, in stillness, in a kind of focused solitude that most people never experience because they're too distracted by noise, validation, and the constant pursuit of affection. But this man detaches from all that. He's not chasing anyone. He's not checking his phone hoping for a text. He's not dressing or speaking in a way to impress. He's just focused on himself, focused on his craft, focused on building something real. And that kind of focus sharpens a man's edge. It transforms his presence. This masculine energy begins to radiate in everything he does. It's in the way he walks, measured, intentional, grounded. It's in the way he speaks, calm, deliberate, never rushed. He doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He doesn't need to dominate a room to feel powerful. His energy speaks before his words do. People feel it when he enters a space. There's a calm authority in him, the kind that comes from knowing who he is and not needing external validation to prove it. He becomes immune to the emotional roller coasters that used to derail him. He doesn't react impulsively. He doesn't get baited into proving himself. He observes, he assesses, he moves when it's time, and when he does, it's with certainty. The time away from relationships forces him to anchor himself in purpose. He has no distractions pulling him away from his mission. His mornings aren't consumed with drama. His nights aren't spent decoding mixed signals or trying to fix something that's always broken. His time belongs to him, and he uses it to grow. Physically, mentally, financially, spiritually, he reads more, learns more, works more, sharpens every edge of himself. He pours energy into becoming the man he was always meant to be. Not for a woman, not for approval, but because he understands that as a man, your purpose is your spine, and without it you bend. This long-term focus creates a kind of internal momentum that's difficult to stop. He starts setting goals and actually reaching them. He sees progress in ways he never did before. Whether it's in the gym, in business, or in personal development, he becomes addicted to growth, and that addiction replaces every other unhealthy craving. He doesn't numb himself with women, substances, or cheap pleasure. He craves discipline, he craves results, and most of all, he craves mastery, because he knows now that life isn't about being liked, it's about being respected. And respect is earned through consistency, integrity, and unwavering commitment to a vision. As this masculine energy deepens, he also begins to intimidate people, often without trying. Women sense that he's not easily impressed, that he can't be manipulated with sex, attention, or emotional games. Other men sense that he's not playing the same game. They feel the difference. He doesn't gossip, doesn't chase status, doesn't seek approval. He's in a different lane entirely. That kind of man can be threatening to those who haven't done the work. Because he doesn't mirror insecurity, he reflects it, and that reflection forces people to confront their own mediocrity. But this energy isn't cold, it's not cruel or dismissive, it's simply indifferent to nonsense. He becomes the type of man who can sit in a room full of noise and remain centered. He's not easily swayed, not emotionally hijacked, not moved by shallow attempts to provoke him. He listens more than he talks, and when he talks it matters. Every move he makes is calculated, not because he's pretending, but because he values energy too much to waste it. He also starts demanding more, not just from others, but from himself. He holds himself to a higher standard. His discipline becomes sacred. He doesn't skip the hard things, he embraces them, because he understands that pressure doesn't break a man, it reveals him. So he seeks out discomfort. He leans into challenges, he tests his limits, and every time he overcomes something, his confidence grows, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, unshakable way that makes people take notice without him ever asking them to. Eventually, he realizes something few men ever do, that real masculinity isn't found in chasing women, flexing wealth, or asserting dominance. It's found in restraint, in presence, in ownership of self. And because he's spent so long without giving his energy away for free, he knows exactly what it's worth. That's why he's selective. That's why he doesn't settle. He doesn't fear rejection. He doesn't crave attention. He only opens his life to someone who sees the man he's become and respects it, not someone who wants to change him, tame him, or compete with him, but someone who understands what it took to build this level of power and chooses to align with it instead of disrupt it. This energy can't be faked, it can't be bought, it can't be borrowed. It's earned slowly over time through solitude, discipline, and radical self-ownership. And once a man has it, he doesn't lose it easily, because it's no longer something he's doing, it's who he is. A man who doesn't need a relationship to feel complete. A man who commands respect without ever raising his voice. A man who's not afraid to be alone, because in that space he found the only thing he ever truly needed, himself. And in finding himself, he unlocked the rarest kind of power, the kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't fold under pressure. He became a man who walks alone not because he has to, but because he chooses to. And if someone is to walk beside him, they must bring as much peace, purpose, and power as he already carries within. Because once a man has built himself in silence, loved himself through solitude, and conquered his demons without applause, he will never again settle for anything that threatens the empire he built in the dark.